She has changed and grown so much in the last year. Her whole life is just, it's unbelievable. I want you to welcome up Christina.
Oh, yeah. We'll watch that first. Okay, we're doing a video first.
Pioneers are like visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world. Unlike 9 out of 10 people, your mind is irrepressible, and this threatens authority. You were born to be a revolutionary. You can't stand rules because in your heart you know there's a better way. You have strengths dangerous to the establishment, and it wants them
I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. About basically, I was forced out of the system. It was by choice, but it was by force. Usually, we come to a point in our lives where shit totally hits the fan. You go, holy fuck, which way is up? And you don't know what to do. And that happened to me on September 8th, 2008, which is really ironic because 8 is like my favorite number in the world. 2008. And what happened, I had gone to the doctor for, your usual yearly, which everybody dutifully goes to because you're told to, right? Okay, well, yeah. Most people go because you're supposed to. It's for your health, right? Okay, so it had been less than 11 months since my last one, and I don't recall anything being unusual at all. And the doctor calls me back like 2 days later under my back, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's really weird. Because normally they tell you, well, yeah, everything's fine. I'm like, why do you even phone me? Like, seriously, what is the phone call for? Right? And he told me to come in. So they got me in that day, and I went into the office, and he told me, he was, well, I got a little bit of bad news for you. You got a very serious pre-cancerous cervical condition. And the reason why I wrote this little chart out for you is because the doctor's office, the gynecologist who talks to the oncologist and pathologist, they use different rating systems, okay? So I was at this stage. And this stage is the stage directly before cancer. And he said, normally we don't really see things like that happen that fast unless, well, I have to back up just a hair. 6 months prior to this, a friend of mine had to have a complete hysterectomy because she got cervical cancer and it spread up into her uterus and stuff like that. And I was going, you heard the big hoopla about the vaccine for HPV because HPV causes cervical cancer. Everybody heard that? Yeah, everybody's familiar? So I decided that as part of my writing project, I was taking this writing course, that my research project was going to be about this related link. And so I had spent about 6 weeks seriously and diligently researching the connection between HPV and cervical cancer, and I found some really disturbing facts. And fact number 1 was that there's 35 different kinds of high-risk HPV that could potentially give you cervical cancer. 35, okay? The second thing that I found disturbing was that HPV relies very heavily on your immune system. If your immune system is down, you are more likely to get abnormal results on a pap smear, cervical cancer, or any virus. Yes, any virus. It could be anything, but HPV is very, very reliant on your immune system as to whether or not you were actually affected. Cervical cancer is actually fairly rare. It's the 11th most common cancer in Canada, but it's the 2nd most common cancer in the world and killer of women. And it's basically because of piss poor information to start with, and also lack of money for most women affected by it who just get to suffer and die. So as soon as he told me that you had stage 4 pre-cervical cancer lesions, I immediately said, from HPV? He's like, oh, yes. They don't tell you that part, okay? I had to confront him and say, is that what it's from? He's like, yes. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Because before my husband and I got married, we all got tested for everything because I'm just anal and paranoid that way. And everything was good to go. You're free and clear. And I'm like, how the hell does this happen? And he told me, well, you could have contracted the virus anytime along the way with any partner at any time. And I was like, what? So I went home and I researched that too. I pulled up some medical research papers from the American Medical Association and some stuff from the Cancer Society and the Cross Cancer Institute. I actually phoned them like 3 or 4 times. I'm sure they hate me. And I totally asked them a ton of questions because it didn't make sense to me. And I went to the library and I started reading books and books and books and books. And what I found out was that in 1975, a man named Dr. Robert Buckman published a book called What You Really Need to Know About Cancer. And in this book, he said that HPV causes cervical cancer. And this was in 1975. Okay? 1975. No one heard a damn thing about HPV until they made a vaccine for it. Yeah, okay. So I was like really mad sitting there in the chair, and he's like, so I'm going to send you to the specialist, and I'm pretty sure he's going to recommend surgery right away for you. And I was like, no, this doesn't make sense, right? This doesn't make sense. And I said, if I could have had it any time along, how come I haven't had any abnormalities along the way to this serious condition? And he's like, well, sometimes it does, you know, so once in a while it just goes right up to dangerous. And I'm like, yeah, that's not ringing true to me either. So I went and researched a little bit more about women's immunity and HPV, and what I discovered was that if you are under the age of 26, 28, your odds of if you are infected, which 75% of you have been in your life, just so you know, your immune system will kick it out in 3 to 9 months. 18 months usually is tops, but they have no guarantee when you're going to develop immunity to it, which means that if any time in that time that you were infected, you had sex with somebody else, you passed on that virus to somebody else. Now, HPV only really seems to affect women reproductively. It doesn't affect men at all. There's no viable test to tell if a man has HPV. Okay, none at all. They're also linking HPV to mouth cancers now, which would be from oral sex, everybody, just so you know. And there are so many things that they're starting to contribute HPV virus infections to: throat cancers, mouth cancers, tongue cancers, basically oral cancer, sometimes even of the eyes, okay? And I started going, wow, this still really doesn't make sense. There's so many questions. And by then the specialist office is calling me going, you know, you need to come in for an appointment. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready to come in for an appointment because no one's answering my questions good enough. Like, this is not making sense to me. And what I found out was that for some reason there's a magic age of 30. And I can't explain why, but when women are 30, your resistance to HPV goes from an 80% chance of getting over it down to less than 20. Then they can't explain it, they don't know what it is, but their hypothesis is that most women in their 30s are now probably in a stable relationship and probably have re-exposure to the virus over and over and over and over, so they can't get over it. They can't build immunity quick enough, and it causes damage. And the doctor drew me a picture, and he said, when I did your pap, because they don't talk to you while they do that, they don't tell you if they see anything, they're just like, we'll call you back if anything comes back. Like, oh. I had spots about yay big that were actual lesions, so sores that you could visibly see with the naked eye. And as he's telling me that, you know, you need to go have surgery and stuff like that, I don't know what happened to me, but something in my little head went snap. And I cannot explain it any other way, but has anybody fallen very far, like bungee jumping? No? No? Anybody totally scared of heights? You get that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well now imagine that you actually jumped and you get that plummeting sensation. I got that in the doctor's office, and I don't think I've ever had that feeling before. And the only thing that came, it was like resounding loud in my head, was, don't do it. And I was like, so I looked at him, I said, no. He's like, what? What do you mean? It's a simple procedure. Like, if you have it now, you know, we can save the rest of your reproductive organs. We'll just cut out your cervix. It'll be fine. And I was like, he's like, it's a day procedure even. You know, don't worry about it. And I'm like, you know what? It has nothing to do with the procedure. Something in me is telling me that this is wrong. And also, I also happened to bring up to him about all this information that I had learned prior to by doing this research project. And he said, unfortunately, men don't know. Men don't know. They just, no one knows if they have it, men or women. But men aren't affected by it. We are. Unless, of course, you get it in your mouth, your eyes, your throat, whatever. And again, your odds of it affecting cancer in your mouth, your oral cavity here is very low. Again, you have to have compromised immune system and you have to be older. It's bizarre. Anyhow, I said, so how long have you known about this? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, in all my research that I've been doing, the whole implementation of the pap smear program is to detect cervical cancer. He said, yes. I said, okay. So why hasn't this been told to the public? I'm sure a lot of women would have made a lot of different choices if they'd known that. And he said, well, it's true. He was when I graduated med school in 1994. We knew without a doubt that cervical cancer was caused by HPV, but we were still wondering how much smoking and the birth control pill affected it. So now I'm like, wee! Really? Okay. So you want to start that? So my wake-up call was finding out that I was very, 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 very close to cancer, and I was supposed to have surgery, but something in me said no. And again, I have nothing against going to Western medicine. If something is broke so far that you can't fix it, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. But there's always a reason for it in the end. But at that time, I wasn't that smart when this happened in 2008. I didn't know about energy work. I didn't know about how much we control our own destiny. I didn't realize how much past traumas and pains affect you as you don't deal with them and as things progress. And so this was what I came up with. So today, I want to kind of discuss what these words, awakening and enlightenment, mean. And to me, it means stirring and initiation. And usually when we're initiated into something that is big, it's caused by a lot of friction. Because only through friction, it seems that we actually grow and experience things. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about enlightenment, through illumination or clarification, because I think there's a lot of obscurity in our systems, and I don't know if I call myself an expert on it, but I would admit that I've gone a fair ways down the rabbit hole, and it's not very pretty. And I love this quote by Socrates: "The only good is knowledge, the only evil is ignorance." So Lorene kind of stole this yesterday with the what state are we born in? You're innocent, you're a blank slate, you're programmable. And it says, how do we start making decisions? Well, by patterning after the people we see, after examples, by what we're told. And where do we get the information that decisions come from? Again, we pattern it after how we're taught, how we're raised, religion, TV, magazines, you name it, whatever. And why do we believe it? Anyone?
Everybody's moving it and talk differently.
Never?
Because there's no way to like not believe it
Because you don't have anything to judge it against, do you?
Yeah.
Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Perfect, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. Perfect. So anyhow, I went home from the doctor and I went, holy shit, I just told him no, I'm not having this surgery that isn't that big of a deal, and I couldn't figure out why my brain was flipping out. You know, like what would be the big deal? Why not just go have the surgery and be done with them? Without having kids anyway, it's not a big deal, right? And anyhow, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that it was wrong for me. And I actually pissed him off so bad by saying no, he was almost crying. And yeah, he told me all kinds of horror stories. He told me he'd been up north working in Mennonite communities and stuff like that, and girls would come in with this condition, 21 years old, and they would refuse surgery because God was going to heal them by faith. And he said he watched young people throwing their lives away because of religious beliefs or whatever, thinking that God was going to save them. And I looked at him and I said, God saves those who help themselves. Sorry, not buying that one either. So I went home and go, all right, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I just told my doctor no, and I made him make a promise. I said, when I cure myself in 6 months, you're going to take my information to the rest of Canada. And he said, no, I'll take it right to the Canadian Cancer Society. And I said, well, no, you can't start there. That's way too corrupt. Sorry. You're going to take it to the Board of Physicians and Surgeons. And he just chuckled at me and laughed it off and said, yeah, okay, sure. I'm like, all right. And so I went home and went, crap, where do I go from here? And the very first thing that came to my mind was, frick, if your immune system is that crappy, let's start with physiology, right? Let's start with the immune system. What the hell's wrong with the immune system? How do we fix it? So I started doing a cleanse, and I also started looking ferociously on the internet for things to overcome. Because I had read a lot about cancer and things like that, I kind of understood the base principles to how cancer works. Basically, a cell goes from being aerobic in respiration, which means it uses oxygen for its cellular functions, to anaerobic, which means it's using carbon dioxide and sugar for every reaction it creates. And the further it goes, as the cell is smothered, it corrupts the DNA. When the DNA is corrupt, it disables a very important gene in your cells called the p53 gene. If the p53 gene isn't there, your cells will not die, okay? And that's why cancer replicates out of control. It has no kill switch, because usually when the body goes, hey, you're not functioning properly, you need to self-destruct. It will die. Cancer, because of smothering, no oxygen, causes this reaction to continue forever. And that's why cancer grows and spreads. And so I went, well, wow, it likes carbon dioxide and it likes sugar. What can I do about that? So I started searching up on the internet, and I started finding lots of stories of people who had beat cervical cancer through diet. And I went, wow, it can't be that hard then, right? The principle seems pretty easy to me. How can I incorporate this? And so I started eating very raw. It was called a macrobiotic diet. There was like no protein, no dairy, no sugar, no white substance of any kind. You were only allowed, the only grain you were allowed was long grain brown rice. And it was because of nutritional purposes, manganese and selenium. Cancer victims lack that. Cancer victims also lack vitamin A, vitamin D. These are things that the doctor doesn't go, hey, we should up that, you know. No, they don't know. Doctors spend, of their whole 4 years, they spend 20 hours on nutrition. That's it. Your doctor doesn't know anything about nutrition. And in Australia just recently, a member of the World Health Organization had the balls to say that nutrition plays very little role on the well-being of the human body. I'm like, somebody give this guy a lobotomy. Who's leading that shit? Seriously. I was like on TV, and this guy's a member of a committee that governs what goes on in our world. Okay. So my goal for my speech, or my outcome that I'm looking for, is to bring to light information which is obscured, hidden, twisted, or reviled against, when in fact it holds merit, truth, or freeing notions that can be expanded on. Knowledge is power. If you don't know what's wrong with you, and you don't like the options that you have, start doing some homework. Because no one's going to fix you but you. And so anyhow, I figured, hey, I've got this under control. I found some herbs that were extremely good at killing cancer, used a lot in the rainforests, the Amazon, and things like that. But you know, I don't live in the Amazon, so I can't really go scrape some bark off this tree. So we had to find it, and finding some of the stuff was really difficult. And another thing that I discovered was that if you have cancer, you also usually are infested with parasites. So number one was diet. Number two was, let's find out how to kill the parasites, or at least control it until my immune system can get them out on their own. Because every single cancer cell is inhabited by another bacteria, virus, pathogen, mold, you name it, okay? When they dissect them, there's always something else in there with them. And so anyhow, by this point, I've gotten about 4 or 5 calls from the specialist's office to come in. They wanted me in at the beginning of October, and I pushed them off until November 17th. And November 17th, I finally went in because I was like, you know, I've been diligent, I've been taking my supplements, I've been doing, you know, my diet. I should, you know, it's been, you know, 2.5 months kind of thing. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a change by now, right? That's what I was hoping. I was like hoping for change. And so I went into the specialist and I started talking to him, and he was asking me some questions. He's like, you know, have you ever had an abdominal pap before? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, you had an abdominal pap 10 months ago. That's kind of weird. And he goes, so what's new in your life kind of thing? I said, well, I got remarried 2 years ago. And he's like, oh, you fit the timeline perfectly then. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, usually women in their 30s who get cervical cancer and can't get over it, it's because they've been exposed to the source. And it's only those who go from nothing to this right away that have been exposed to a new source. If you started down here with just minor abnormalities and they just kind of crept up slowly over time, then they can't guess where you got it. It could have been from anybody. But people who go from usually 0 to this have been in contact with the source continually. And poor guys, you guys don't know. You guys don't know that you have it. You don't know that you're passing it on. And so at any rate, at that point in time, I was really pissed off. You know, because here's the one person that you should trust with your life completely, and they've just given you something that could kill you. Great. So that took me a while to come to grips with. And as I was reading more about cancer, the statistics and things like that, I was like, are you kidding me? This is the new one. So I got the most recent one. There will be 75,000 Canadians that die from cancer this year. Yet research into things like nutrition or alternative health or things like that are minuscule. Yet, what, 30, 40 people get killed in violent acts? Or if you want to call them, you know. In the US, their statistic is 70 people in a year die from a terrorist act, yet their budget is over $50 billion.
Wow.
Are the priorities a little fucked up?
Yep.
Who's dying? So the very first thing I had to come to grips was that, wow, am I stupid? I know nothing. I have been in a system that has taught me to listen to authority, taught me to be a good little sheep, and I honestly knew nothing. And the more that I learned information, the more that I took that little journey down the rabbit hole, the more I went, wow, does this world need an enema? And it says, we don't receive wisdom, we must discover it for ourselves after a journey that no one can take for us or spare us. And that is totally the truth. This was my wake-up call. And so in the specialist office, after we had a little chat, and I was like, wow. I said, so really Health Canada has been negligent as far as women's health goes. I said, because I never heard a damn thing about this thing until the vaccine came out. And anytime you heard of HPV before, it was like, don't get genital warts. Oh my God. Genital warts are not going to kill you, okay? It's a low-grade infection. They freeze them off, they cut them off, whatever the hell they do to them, I don't know. Well, that is what they do, but seriously, it's not going to do anything to you. It's not going to end your life. But the 35 other high-risk ones that are floating around there can kill you. And anyhow, I had to wrap my brain around that because I was like, the pharmaceutical companies all know this. And why are they making a vaccine? The only time they decided that our health and our well-being mattered was when they could make a profit off it. In the meantime, over 1 million more women die worldwide from cervical cancer. Isn't that nice? I was like, wow, I can't believe this. So anyhow, back to the specialist. I was like, so he's like, well, let's see what happens. We'll take some samples, we'll take some biopsies, and just see exactly where you're at. Because sometimes, he goes, packs are really accurate, but we'd like to see just how serious and how deep it's going. I'm like, all right, whatever. So they spray you down with vinegar because abnormal cells don't like vinegar; they turn white. And then they, spray iodine in there so they show up really good, so they can view it with a dark field microscope. And the first thing he goes is, wow, I've seen lots of high-grade lesions. This doesn't look like one. So inside I'm going, oh, it's working already. Oh, I'm so excited. And so I went home all hopeful and delivered the bad news to Tony that it most likely was a source from him, and that was a source of conflict. And everybody at that time I was like, you're such a prick. If you had unprotected sex with somebody, you should have said something, and blah 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 blah. And anyhow, he took the brunt of it for a long time, and I'm sorry, man. Anyhow, the specialist calls me back 5 days later. They told me it would take 10 days. They called me back 5 days later and goes, well, you need to come back in. I was like, what? That's not the answer I was looking for. So now it's the end of November, and I decided that I was too busy with work to go back. Really, I was doing so bad that if I went back, I probably would have bitten him. So December, I don't know how this happened, but the only other day that I could get in to see him was December 18th. I'm like, fuck, can I get any words? Here. So I go back in to see him, and he's like, yeah, I got bad news. It is a high grade. We need to remove it. He goes, the good news is that it seems to only really be, he goes, your cervix is actually affected from here all the way this way to here. There's only one spot that was healthy. He said, but there's two major areas that are here and here. You know, so we're gonna he goes, we're gonna try to remove it all with a lead procedure first. If that doesn't work, we'll try again. And if that doesn't work, then he goes, I've noticed some abnormal cells going up into your uterus as well. We might have to just give you a hysterectomy. And I was like, fuck no. Not gonna happen. And anyhow, I said, no, I need to finish what I started. I said, I will see you at the end of my 6 months and we'll go from there. He's like, what do you mean? And I said, I believe that the body can heal itself. If you give it what it needs, the body can heal itself. And just to give you a little example of my suspicion that the system really has your best interest at heart, when I was 11, I used to get tonsillitis a lot, sore throats, tonsillitis a lot. And when I was 11, I was like, I wonder, I should just tell my mom I have a sore throat and get her to take me to the doctor. I just want to see what's going to happen. Like, what kind of kid thinks of that? Right, so we go to the doctor and he's like, you have tonsillitis bad. Yeah, here you go. Amoxicillin, those little red and orange pills, 500 milligrams, I was on them a lot. We get outside and I tore up the prescription and threw it on the sidewalk. She said, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't have a sore throat. I don't. Anyhow, she was a little mad at me because she took time off to come get me from school. It was a science experiment. So 11 years old, I was already suspicious of the system. So I never ever went to the doctor unless I had to or I broke something. And so as the specialist and I are having this argument, and I'm telling him, no, I need to finish my 6 months. He's like, well, you need to be careful with those homeopathics and those naturopathic doctors because they kill people. And I freaking laughed right in front of him. I said, dude, I'm no dummy. I said, Vioxx, ring a bell, 55,000 Americans in 1 year. I said, how about the 80,000 that die from prescription screw-ups? And that doesn't even include you guys' medical blunders. And I said, what about the million who suffered iatrogenic disease after taking prescription drugs, which damage your body to the point that you suffer a disorder or an illness from a prescription drug for the rest of your life? I said, don't those statistics count? I said, there's not, and there is not one recorded incident of people dying from natural medicines and things like that unless they've screwed it up themselves. There was one. That was the statistic. That was the one that was reported to Health Canada and the CDC in the US. In 1 year, one person died. Okay?
Really?
Wow. Yeah. And so anyhow, after that little thing, he was like really mad because I laughed at him. And he's like, well, it's your gamble. If you're gonna take your risks with that, you're responsible for it. If you die, it's your fault, basically. And I was like, wow. So the only thing that made me continue after I left that appointment was that when it came back as a high grade, the oncologist and pathologist rated differently. They rated on a scale of 1, 2, 3, these stages of pre-cancer, okay? And 1 is low, 2 is high, 3 is the equivalent to this one, okay? So technically, I should have been a 3, because that's what I was on my path. The only thing that made me go, something might just be working, not as fast as I wanted though, just to clarify, was that they couldn't tell me if I was a 2 or a 3. I was somewhere in between. Because normally they would label you. They go, you're a 2 and you're a solid 2, or you're a 2, which is high grade, but you're a 3, which means you're right on the line. And they couldn't label me as those. They just classified me as 2. So I was like, nope, I'm going to go and finish this. And so a couple weeks later, I was feeling a lot better. And I decided that, this isn't going fast enough. It should be going fast enough. I must be missing something. There must be something else that I can do. And I ordered this fabulous, fabulous book off the internet. I love the internet. It's the only thing that keeps our government honest. Called Cancer Step Outside the Box. And in this book, the author, Ty Bollinger, lost both his parents to stomach cancer. And in this book, this man dedicated I don't know how many years of his life. I think he dedicated 3 years of his life to finding alternative cancer cures that were effective and putting them in a book so that people could find out what they were, learn about them. He gave numbers to doctors, clinics, and stuff in here that you can call and find out about and everything. And as I read this book, voraciously from cover to cover in like 3 days, I came across 2 things that really struck me. And one was a little molecule called B17. B17, also known as Laetrile or amygdalin, a vitamin not sold in your multivitamins, a vitamin not allowed in your food, a vitamin that the trees that do produce it, like the bitter almond tree, is not allowed to grow in North America normally. If you do have one, don't tell anyone. Now B17 is interesting because it has 2 other molecules, one of benzaldehyde, I'm not going to write the whole thing, that's too long, and the other one is cyanide. Everybody heard about cyanide?
Yeah.
Oh, it's bad. Don't take cyanide. Don't eat your apple seeds because there's cyanide in them, right? It'll make you sick. Now, there's one very interesting thing about B17, and this is why I was fascinated, because I kind of been learning a little bit about cancer, how cancer functions, and I remembered that it really liked sugar. Attached to these are glucose molecules, which is sugar. And when you deprive your body of all forms of sugar, your cancer starts to starve. And when cancer starves, it will open up its membrane to anything that is sugar-like. As it does that, it is ingesting benzaldehyde and cyanide and poisons it, and it dies.
Clever.
Now, everybody's going, but it's bad for the rest of your body. This is where the lie is. A healthy cell has an enzyme called, and tell me if I said this right, rhodinase?
Yes.
Okay. Has a healthy enzyme called rhodinase. Rhodinase breaks B17 down into a complex extremely similar to aspirin. So it acts as a painkiller, which is extremely effective. Because healthy cells break this down. They don't get poisoned. Bad, unhealthy cells get poisoned and they die. And so B17, the most common source, was apricot kernels. And since it was December, apricots weren't exactly in season. And I was like, where the hell am I going to get apricot kernels from? And so I started to search all over, and it must have just not have been the right time yet, looking at all the wrong places. And I went to Chinatown, and they did have apricot kernels, but I didn't know that they were blanched. I just went, apricot kernels, I'll buy them, I'll take them, whatever, right? And they said, what are you going to use it for? I said, well, it kills cancer, and they laughed at me. The Chinese medicine guy laughed at me. I was like, well, whatever. I don't care. There you go. Now, there's a couple things when you take B17 that you have to be aware of, that your body needs zinc to process it, and it also needs digestive enzymes. If you have cancer, your pancreas is not putting out enough enzymes to properly digest and assimilate your food, so basically the rest of you is starving. And so I took my B17 little apricot kernels until I found a place where I could actually order B17 from. And I ordered raw apricot kernels from the Bahamas, paid an arm and a leg for shipping. I got apricot kernels. It came in pill form as well and injectable. And I'm like, I don't really think I'm at the injectable stage, but we'll go with the apricot kernels and the pills. The pills I took because I could regulate what my dose was rather than trying to count apricot kernels, and they taste really bad, but I still eat them. And so
Just bitter.
they're really nasty.
Yeah, they are.
Nasty bitter. And so I started doing all this, and also I drank colloidal silver. And basically all pathogens die in the presence of ionically charged silver. So colloidal silver is a big one for colds, viruses, flus, scratches, infections, eye infections, nasal infections, sinus infections, ear infections, you name it, I use it for everything. And I've had one cold in the last 3 years. Yeah, one.
Well, no, I'm just gonna, my mother makes,
Colloidal silver?
yeah, so I get a big, and of course, B17 comes in other forms as well.
Yeah, comes in berries.
Blackberries, strawberries, anything that has a seed in it.
Anything has a seed. So eat your apple seeds and eat your berries and millet. millet. The grain millet also contains B17. And it's also the only grain that does not become acidic in your body once you eat it. It stays alkaline. And when you are alkaline, you don't get disease. Okay? This is the other thing you will never be taught by your doctor. Your pH makes a difference. If your pH is acidic, you will get sick. You will catch colds, you will get viruses. If you are alkaline or neutral, you don't get sick.
Internal pH.
Internal pH, yes, sorry.
And
Internal pH.
my pH was, I was just gonna say, my pH for like the last probably 6 months has been really off the chart. And I've discovered a way to actually get it back to normal and just squeeze a lemon in water
Every morning.
every morning and
Every
actually
morning.
every night.
And it alkalizes your body. Also, taking equal amounts of non-aluminum baking soda in maple syrup. If you mix it a ratio of 1 take a teaspoon every night, that alkalizes you all night. Yes. So anyhow, to sum up the story, I went back in March. Yes.
Does most baking soda from grocery stores have a little bit of it?
Yes, it does. You have to
How do you know that it's there? It's not exactly listed as an
They
ingredient.
don't tell you that.
You have to go
Yeah.
find a source that
Planet
says
Organic
without.
Yeah.
sells it on their little spice rack in bags, and it says non-aluminum organic baking soda. Yes, and that's the other thing. If you want your health, like if you're healing from a crisis, it's expensive. I'm sorry.
It's good just to put it in warm water and mix it up to the baking soda.
You betcha. You betcha. Maple syrup's just more palatable.
Yeah.
So it's just the non-aluminum baking soda, actually. Yeah.
Yep. But also because you're creating an alkaline state and giving sugar at the same time, the cancer cells are sucking in an alkaline substance along with the sugar. And so I was like, okay, cool. It's March. I gotta go back now. It's been like 6 months. And I was really still in my pissed off stage, which I'm sure slowed down my healing some. And I was being particularly vindictive, and I decided that if I was going to go through all this suffering, eating separately, cooking separately, my freaking bills were like $1,200 a month just for me to eat. Okay, like to eat and my supplements, it was expensive. And there wasn't a lot of input from my family. And I don't blame the kids, because like you guys knew what to do. And I don't blame Tony anymore, but at the time I did. At the time I did, and I decided that if I was going to go back and have a second set of classes, my God, he was going to watch. And so I made him come to the specialist with me. And I made him sit in this tiny room that was already too small. And I wanted the doctor to tell him everything that he had told me the first time again. I just wanted to rub it in because I was like so pissed off. Why me, right? Like the whole why me shit. Poor me. Yeah, what a crock. Anyhow. Yeah, I can look back and say that now, but at the time.
No. Exactly.
And the doctor looked at me and goes, I didn't say that.
Liar.
And I went, what? Are you kidding me? I have a very good memory for numbers, facts, you name it, and he told me I didn't say that. I said, what? And he goes, no, I did not say that. You're lying. You were putting lying words in my mouth. That's a quote from him.
Bastard.
That was it.
So he meant like seeing that you were in the fourth stage of...
No, this is the specialist. When he told me that I most likely went from 0 to nothing because I was re-exposed to an infected source over and over and over. And Tony can't have children, so we never used protection. There's no reason to. And so he called me a liar. He said, I never said any of those things. I never said, you guys could have got it anywhere. And I was so mad. Anyhow, he goes, sprays you all down, gets out his little, magnifying glass, starts to poke around, and like he's taking forever. Last time he went in there, he sprayed, dyed it, took 2 biopsies, right? Here, and he's poking around, and then he sprays me down again, dyes me again, poking around. I'm like, what the hell is the holdup? Right? Like seriously, I already hate you, want to kick you in the head, like let's be done now. And he's like, well, I don't see any of this. I don't see any of this anymore. And I'm like, what do you see? And he goes, well, there's still a mild affected area here. And he kind of drew it like this, like it was just mild, whereas before it was covered. Mild affected area here. And I said, so what does that mean? He goes, well, because you had this, we should still do the procedure.
Whatever.
And I went, are you on crack?
I need my money.
Yeah, I gotta book the room. That's right. And I went, are you on crack? And I'm like, you know what? No way. If it's already down to low, then forget it. I'm out of here. Like, I am out of here and you'll never see me again. And so I went into my regular doctor just to tell him what happened because I was so pissed off. And he went, that's, don't ever go back to him. We'll find somebody else to deal with your follow-up. And I said, there will be no follow-up. Are you not listening to me? It's just this now. Why would I go have body parts cut out if it's no longer necessary? And he's like, well, based on your history, I'm like, and that's just what it is. It's history. And so anyhow, he's like, well, I'll call you when I get the report. I'm like, fine. 4 months go by. I haven't got a phone call. No phone call. No phone call. I'm like, what the hell? Like, seriously, obviously it can't be that bad. So I was like, all right, I'll just keep going on with what I'm doing and stuff. And so anyhow, I ended up going in for an annual 6-month checkup from the date of my last biopsies. Oh yeah, and when he took the biopsies the second time, he took 5. Yeah, he took 5.
Freak.
Ouch. I would have kicked him in the teeth.
Yeah, and coughing doesn't help, just so you know. That whole cough while we pinch a piece of flesh off, dude. Yeah, it doesn't help. No, it doesn't help. And remember those abnormal cells that he saw the first time going up into my uterus? Well, I asked him what the results of the ECG had been, which is not the hard one, just so you know. And he's like, I never took one. There was obviously no reason to. I said, well, you saw abnormal cells going up into my uterus last time. Like, what were the results of that? And he's like, well, obviously I didn't do it because it didn't need one. And he starts flipping through the paperwork and he comes to a page and he stops. And so I'm like, well, can you see that now? He's like, no, actually, I don't see any of that. And I'm like, okay. So what does he do? He gets out this thing that looks like this cute little, like 1-inch kind of round cylinder baby rattle thing with a stick. But no pretty patterns on the outside. It's got little fucking razor blades. Okay?
Oh.
And they stick that up inside you above your cervix and they turn it really slowly, 360 degrees, to get an entire top layer sample above your cervix. And I'm telling you, that is a fucking piece of cake compared to the biopsies. I'm sure he did it just because I already had a fight with him before we had the procedure. Anyhow. So when I finally went back to my regular GP, I was like, dude, it's been 6 months, like, where are the results? And he's like, well, actually it's very surprising. I said, and what is it? He goes, well, there's only just a low amount of atypical cells there. It's just slightly abnormal. And I said, okay. And he goes, and the pathologist doesn't recommend that you have any surgery anymore. He just wants you to have regular follow-ups. I was like, all right, great, right on. And I was like, that's fantastic. So that's where you guys heard my story last year, was at this point.
Yep.
Okay, so I was at this point. And I went back another 6 months later, and again, there was still this here. But I am positive that it was because I was still dealing with anger and stuff like that that I hadn't fully worked through. And once you get this twice in a row after having something this bad, then they want you to go have it cut out. I'm like, why? It's not getting worse. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, again, my GP starts in with a little mind fuck. He's like, no, you should really go have it removed. It's gonna come back. That's what they told me, it's gonna come back. It's gonna come back. So you might as well just nip it in the bud right now. That was their thing, prevention. And so, you know, the little me inside's like going, no, don't do it. And I'm like going, by then I'm like, I'm totally in tune with the little me because it's making far more sense than all the other bullshit that I'm being told. And so I decided not to do it. And again, 6 months later, same thing. Abnormal, And this time, the pathologist is saying, no, go have the surgery. And I'm like going, no, you guys can all jump off a cliff. And the thing is, I'd be feeling really good going, you know what, it's not getting any worse. So obviously what I'm doing is enough. And I was like, you know, if it took 2 years to get that bad, it only makes sense that it might take 2 years to come out. Right? It might, I'm not going to judge that. Obviously, when I'm done with the issue, it'll go away. And so finally, this last March, I went and there is absolutely nothing. Woo! And their whole thing was that once the damage was done, you can still develop immunity after that, but the damage has already been done. You have to remove the damage or it doesn't matter. And I was like, no, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't work with my little brain. So that's what they go on. They go on the damage is done, remove the damage. And I go on the give your body what it needs and it should be able to reverse itself. So anyhow, I'm like super happy and I'm in a great mood. I'm like, really? That's awesome. That's great. So are you going to keep your promise? And his excuse, he's like, well, you know, it could still come back. You give me 6 more months. I'm like, whatever. By then I'm like, I don't care what you think anymore at all. I'll see you in 6 months, you know, whatever. So that's my story in a nutshell. And it's not all, yes, it was something that I overcame because I had to. Just take your pick. And the whole time you're going through the dilemma of, okay, am I really making a difference? The whole doubt. Am I making a difference? Especially when people in authority are telling you that you're wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And then going, I'm going to wash my hands clean of you. That was another one. Oh, I love that line. I told you my advice and I'd wash my hands clean of you. All right. And the thing is, this part of my story isn't the focus anymore. The part of my story is everything I learned about what happened. Oh, I went backwards. How did that happen?
Just go from there.
No, it's going backwards.
Click
Yeah.
Just running through.
There you go.
One
Okay.
more time.
There we go. There we go. This is the part of my illness that I will be forever 100% grateful for because now we're going to break every belief system that you have ever had. And I'm going to say things that you guys might not necessarily agree with, and, well, I don't care.
You go, girl.
That's, I'm not gonna give a fuck. But anyhow, my point is that just take it as information. Just take it as information. Take what you want from what I'm going to tell you. This is the world that you live in. This is the system that we're a part of. This is the illusion that we are trying to get out of. That's cool. So the pharmaceutical industry has kind of its birth where it became very popular back in World War II. Prior to the 1900s, a big pharmaceutical chemical company called IG Farben came to be. And IG Farben was big time into synthetic fuels. And after the stock market crash of the 1930s, a U.S. oil company owned by the Rockefellers named Standard Oil. Yeah. They needed synthetic oil. They wanted the recipe for synthetic oil because it was cheaper to produce, it was more efficient, it lasted longer, and so they sold 35 million shares to IG Farben for permission to make synthetic oil. IG Farben in turn took that 35 million and they funded a really awesome guy named Hitler. Yes, and the only reason why Hitler came to power was because Hitler was obsessed with synthetic fuels. He saw the future in synthetic fuels. He saw how you could rule the world if you own the oil companies and the fuel companies and all those things that we still rely on today. And IG Farben built this really cool place called Auschwitz. Anybody familiar with that?
Yep.
All right, Auschwitz, one of the biggest death camps for the Jews. And IG Farben used the Jews as slave labor in their synthetic oil, synthetic rubber factories, and they also used them for medical experiments. There's a guy named Dr. Joseph Mendel, who is responsible for those. And they figured that approximately, and the thing is the numbers are not accurate because the lists are not accurate either. So they're guessing between 150,000 and close to 500,000 people. 500,000 people definitely went through the Auschwitz concentration camp, but they figure about 150,000 to 350,000 actually died in Auschwitz's, either their synthetic oil rubber factories or in their medical experiments, and most of the medical experiments were women, a lot of them, and it was to sterilize the Jews. So they were doing all kinds of nasty experiments, such as injecting chemicals directly into a woman's uterus to see what would happen. They also, if a woman was pregnant in childbirth, they tethered her legs together to see how long she would last. They did all kinds of nasty, gross things, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with the saying, whatever doesn't kill you will only make you stronger. That was Hitler when he visited the Auschwitz medical experiment facility. So you might want to consider ever saying that ever again. Now it doesn't end there. On the last slide here. Oh, come on, I did it again. Sorry. Can I go back to previous? Oh, that's okay. No, just leave that. That's okay. This is part of it too. In the Auschwitz's military camp, one of the chemists came up with a brilliant idea. He discovered how toxic fluoride was, and he discovered that if you gave doses of fluoride to a human being, it made them docile, it made them non-aggressive, and it also atrophied their pineal gland. Your pineal gland is responsible for connecting you to your higher self, your intuition, and really for being in tune, mind, body, and spirit. And they figured out that if they fluoridated the water, everybody did what they were told, and there was way less friction. Now, these scientists who figured that out mysteriously disappeared from the Nuremberg war crime trials. After World War II, at the Nuremberg war crime trials, there was 13 different cases with multiple individuals involved in each case. A lot of them were executed, a lot of the military personnel that were responsible were executed, but mysteriously a bunch of the scientists from IG Farben were gone. And IG Farben was ordered to disband. Everybody else was put to death, jailed for the rest of their life, but IG Farben was ordered to disband. And all that meant was that they broke up into different companies. They broke up into 5 daughter companies. Bayer is one, Adventus is another. Oh man, I can't remember all of them. Anyhow, those are the 2 that just totally stick out in my head all the time. And they were allowed to continue functioning. And I actually was totally interested with the whole freedom of information thing coming out, that I could solicit perhaps getting a copy of these records now. And Harvard Law was actually doing a research project, and they were doing it on the Nuremberg war crime trials. So I contacted Harvard and I said, hey, I would really like the records of the trial against IG Farben. And they said, well, you'll have to contact the library's archives for that, but no one has access to those 10,000 pages. They're just gone. Gone. Yeah. Anybody else smell a real dirty rat? Yeah. So, this chemist was, this statement was made in the 1940s, or 1947 to 53, I think. This guy was working, and this is the recommendation he gave Congress against fluoridating water. And Congress decided that they would do it anyway. So, for those of you who enjoy drinking city water, if you want to keep yourself repressed, if you want to, cut off that possibility of accessing something higher than what you're told, keep drinking fluoride and brushing your teeth with it.
Calgary just finished.
Fighting it.
Just took it out of the water.
Yep, you betcha.
And I don't use toothpaste with it.
No.
I'm learning to do it.
Good. So, it goes even further than this. The pharmaceutical companies were developing at such a rate, and it was such a money-making profit. And you have to understand that it goes from banks to oil to pharmaceutical companies, down to other banks, down to other corporations. Okay, that's kind of the food chain of our socioeconomic sickness. And So these powerful families that run these huge banks, the Rockefellers, the Carneys, the Morgans, they decided that, you know, a way to keep the population in check was perhaps to use, basically take away all the natural stuff. That was their gist. They wanted to not only own the oil and fuel, but they wanted to own your health. And so there was two gentlemen that actually did a study. The first one is Abraham Flexner. Abraham Flexner was hired by the Rockefellers to go and do a 5-year study of all the hospitals and medicine practices that had popped up in the U.S. from just before the 1900s up to late 1940s. And basically, I'll read part out of here. I'd rather read it word for word. He says, to digress a little bit, he goes, go back to 1910 and back in our history to the Flexner Report. In order to build his drug cartel, the Rockefeller needed to re-educate the medical profession to prescribe more pharmaceutical drugs, because at that time, they were still very much using holistic practices, and they were using natural medicines. So he hired Abraham Flexner to travel the country and assess all the U.S. medical schools. Anyhow, I want to read you the pertinent part here. Okay. In reality, there was little assessing going on by Flexner. The results of his study were predetermined already. Evidentially, Flexner submitted a report to the Carnegie Foundation. The Carnegie Foundation is run by the Carnegies. Yeah. Entitled The Medical Education in the United States and Canada. Not surprisingly, the gist of the report was that it was far too easy to start a medical school and that most of the medical schools were not teaching sound medicine because they weren't pushing drugs. The report was also installed as a doorkeeper to determine which medical schools were allowed through that door and which ones would remain outside. The report was presented to the U.S. Congress and they swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. As we see quite often, politicians are quite willing to enact laws that rob us of our constitutional freedoms under the banner of public protection. Thus, the American Medical Association became the new doorkeeper and was empowered to determine which medical schools were proper in following the standards of conventional medicines and which ones were not. In this private organization, which began in 1847 and basically is known as the Physicians Union, doesn't have the American Medical Association, has nothing to do with the federal government. It is a separate entity. So don't think that any of the recommendations that come from them are coming from your government. They're not. And Canada is not as bad, but we ride the back of the U.S. in everything we do. If it happens in the U.S., it's happening here. And the only difference, So basically what the Flexner Report did was give the American medical schools the right to say that those who prescribe drugs were real doctors, those who offer different lines of treatment were quacks. Yeah, and so the number of homeopathic and naturopathic schools from 1910 to 1904 dropped in half. By early 1960, there were none. And at the time, there was over 64 practicing before the Flexner Report. And this guy also submitted a report to the Rockefellers, and he did the same thing. He compared allopathic medicine to religious cults. He said that they were more wrapped up in dogma than the new science, which was drugs. And it just isn't true. So by 1957, the U.S. Congress started to smell a little bit of a rat in the American Medical Association. Because they're like going, there's an awful lot of good alternatives out there. What seems to be the problem here? And the U.S. Congress set up a committee to investigate corruption. And it's very interesting that once that committee started to do their work, the founder and head of that committee was killed. And every other member of that committee was taken out some way or another, whether they committed suicide or they were just flat out killed or disappeared. Every single one of them. There was not a single member of that committee left. And so I started going, this is ridiculous. Like, are you serious? It's all for profit? That's it? And I want you to watch this. The volume?
Okay, let's talk about the rat of the week. Why is Bear Corporation the rat of the week?
Internal documents show that after this company positively absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine is called Factorate. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an
Hold on, Mike. So you're telling me that Bear knew that this drug was infected with the AIDS virus, they yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas?
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit. They dropped the product in Japan, Spain, and France. By the way, Joe, government officials in France that allowed that to happen actually had to go to prison for it. In America, not one corporate executive for this company has been indicted or even criminally investigated by our Justice
Why
Department.
not? Why you're telling me that these people that dump this AIDS-tainted blood in foreign countries, you kill children, have not been taken to task in the United States?
It's worse than that. The U.S. government allowed it to happen. The FDA allowed this to happen. And now the government's completely looking the other way. Thousands of innocent hemophiliacs have died from the AIDS virus. And not only they're dying, their family members are dying because they're becoming infected with the disease. This company knew absolutely that they had a problem with the product. They knew that it was infected with AIDS. They dumped it because they wanted to turn this disaster into a profit.
Mike, I want to read to you what Bear told the New York Times about this scandal. He said, Bear behaved responsibly, ethically, and humanely. Decisions made nearly 2 decades ago were based on the best scientific information of the time and were consistent with the regulations in place. That sounds like a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. Now, you say you have internal documents that show that they knew that this drug they were dumping was taken with the AIDS drug? The AIDS virus?
The documents show that there was no question that this company absolutely understood the risk, that they knew that it was contaminated. It wasn't a possibility. They knew it was contaminated. Americans were dying from the product before it was pulled off the market. The only reason it was pulled off the market is because lawyers found the documents and showed them to the government. And finally, the government said, you can't sell it here, but then the government allowed them to dump it in Spain, France, and Japan.
That's amazing. That's just amazing. I want to read to you what the New York Times said. This is an investigation that they also did, and they said the federal government was part of the problem. While the Food and Drug Administration told the company not to ship the drugs overseas, the man responsible for the drug supply, quote, asked that the issue be quietly solved without alerting the Congress, the medical community, and the public. This is a cover-up, and our Congress...
So what you guys need to understand is that your government is not in charge. Your government, whether you elect them democratically or whatever, it's a lie. Your government is run by a bunch of very, very wealthy people who own a very, very large percent of this world's resources. They own approximately 45% of this world's resources. Your government is puppets. And even if your government thinks they know what's going on, the only reason why they're there is because they are complying to meet the wishes of those who are pulling the strings. Otherwise, they would be killed. JFK ring a bell? JFK has a lot to do with the polio vaccine, cancer, and the AIDS virus. Not anything to do with Fidel Castro. So, these are just some little, I ranted about this earlier, that's okay. For a second. Yeah, that's very similar. There you go. It isn't the quality of the information that matters, it is the confirmation of the story from the official source that makes it real. This is what we are suffering as a society. We are all in a gullible mind syndrome. Anybody in authority that tells us something, we believe it. We are part of a system that is designed to conform you. You are supposed to be a good little worker. You are supposed to go to work. well, go to school, get a job, go to work, pay, be a consumer, consume. Seema?
Sorry, I have a lot of friction over this, and I have to just head out.
Absolutely.
So to go on with the skillful mind syndrome, there's this David Suzuki article that our clinic put out, which I saw on the internet, and I freaked out when I read it the first time. But like a clinic that me, Seema, chemist, am part of, is just sending out garbage that, I know it's garbage, but they can't rescind it because it's a clinic. And David Suzuki said it, so it must be true.
My advice is question everything and believe nothing until you have come to your own conclusion through your own research. Fear sells and controls. H1N1. Oh my God.
I had a very bad reaction.
Stupid.
I was in Mexico when that hit. And you know what? There was nothing going on in Mexico. There was nothing going on. And all you saw was an odd Japanese person walking around with a mask. And when I heard about people reacting here,
Bird flu stuff.
Avian.
Avian flu,
Okay,
garbage.
now the thing you need to know about H1N1 is that WHO, the World Health Organization, declared a worldwide pandemic level 6. That's as high as you can get. And they skipped all the protocol necessary to pass a vaccine safely. There was no protocol for that. If you read in their little mission statement, it says that they are allowed to supersede protocols in a state of an emergency. And they declared this an emergency. Now, H1N1 has been here in 1976. That's why most older people had an immunity to it, and that's why the younger people with compromised immune systems were dying. Okay?
I read something that just blew my mind. I don't know what I read it in, but H1N1 was something that millions of people died from in the 20s and 30s. And it was the same strain.
No.
But
Wasn't
they
this
had
one?
the people were in one bed to the next bed. They said they only had 3 feet in between them, and they ended up everybody there, and the nurses, everybody got it. And that is what started the fear of this H1N1 because it was the same type of thing.
I'm going to tell you something else about H1N1 you guys probably don't know. There's a lady named Jane Burgermeister. And Jane Burgermeister is from Austria. She's an investigative reporter who deals primarily with biological issues. She knows a lot about this stuff. She went to one of the companies overseas manufacturing one of the vaccines for H1N1, and because there was 5 different companies that manufactured them. And she confronted them. She said, your vaccine is tainted. And there were extra things in the vaccine, such as cancer cells and things like that, that were deliberately put there. She knows biological protocol, and she said there is no way that that vaccine would have been shipped without them knowing that it was tainted with other things beside what it was intended to do. It was about population control, I agree. And the thing is, a lot of people who are healthy are probably going to be okay. It's people who are already immune compromised, or the very elderly, or the very young, who are at higher risks of suffering effects from this 10 years down the road. And Jane Burgermeister went national. She is the woman who actually took out a legal lawsuit against NATO and WHO, because the United Nations and WHO, because they did not step in and prevent corruption from happening. So she brought a legal lawsuit against them. The last I heard, which was 6 months ago, she is on criminal trial, and Austria is stripping her of all her civil rights. She's not allowed to make a decision for herself or anything, and she's facing jail time, probably indefinitely. Just to silence her. And in the peak for the H1N1 whole fiasco was November 2009. That's when the climax of how many people were dying from it happened. Yet when I went into my doctor's office for a follow-up PAP, like earlier that year, the next year, they were still offering H1N1 shots, and they were actually encouraging people to come back for a second one. Did you guys hear all that?
Yeah.
We should have 2 now. Yeah. It's because the public didn't bite. There were so many people who said this smells of bullshit that they didn't go, and there was excess vaccine everywhere. Yep.
There was a huge lack of response from healthcare workers.
Yep.
That was a really publicized fact.
Yep.
And I was sure why.
And
I
a
used to
doctor,
be a healthcare worker, and I'll tell you right now, 99% of the time when they ask you to go get vaccines for stuff, it's bullshit. You don't need it.
it actually makes you more susceptible.
It makes you more, it makes you sick 24 hours after getting it.
But if you get the flu, they do not have to pay you sick pay, because you did not prevent it.
Yeah, it's all a bunch of bullshit. It's fear to make you conform. And this is,
All I have to do, all you can do to actually prevent that from happening, so that you do get paid sick pay, is to get a doctor's note. Say, I'm not wanting, I want to.
They have the virus on the floor.
The research summary that I did on it was that it only actually protected from 2 types.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, I had the health unit call me and give me crap that I wasn't sending my daughter in there. I said, I am sorry. And the other thing is if I have the antibody for it, I pass it on to my children or something. There was something to do with,
that's hit and miss too.
I
That's
know,
not
it's hit
entirely, that's not
Yeah.
entirely accurate. It's a possibility,
it's a possibility.
but it's not set in stone.
Yeah, and isn't it, yeah, so there was a bunch of, but they got really mad at me, but I just want to
Your own body builds immunity to a certain.
Exactly. So I went to the doctor and I said, why are you guys still offering this? The pandemic was over. Like the climax of people dying was in November last year. Why are you still offering this shot? This is stupid, it's ridiculous, it's not safe. And his answer to me, and he didn't even look me in the eye, he said, we're not offering it, the government is.
Bullshit.
It is the government offering it, yes.
One way to force us as healthcare aides to take it was if there was that flu virus on our unit, relieve our hours for work as well, because we hadn't had it.
They haven't had it.
They did
They
that
tried to
to
force us to take it.
They did that to my mother too. She was cooking at nursing.
So I bet a bunch of you are probably experiencing some friction over this now.
Friction?
Anybody? Friction?
Friction.
Going, wow, this challenges a lot of things that I know, a lot of things that I believe. Now you're probably all going, well, what do you believe? That's the point of being here. We're trying to set you guys in your higher self to realize that you are in charge of you, be responsible for you, and find the answers yourself.
If the higher ups know all this shit, isn't there a great big giant piss pot of money to be made by making healthy stuff and shoving that down our throat instead?
But the Carnegies are part of that. I'm like, does Bill C6, C51, C36 ring a bell? That bill is a blank check for Health Canada to do whatever they want. The vaccine myth, here we go. By injecting live or dead viruses or bacteria into the body along with stimulus of an adjuvant is something that creates an immune response in your body. It's usually thimerosal, which is a form of mercury. It's ethyl mercury. Okay? Mercury crosses the blood-brain barrier and pools here. Aluminum hydroxide or aluminum phosphate also cross the blood-brain barrier and pool in your brain. Your neurological reactions and ability to comprehend are being impaired by vaccines. The body will create a super immune response, create antibodies to the intended illness, and therefore overcome any ailment that might be suffered if exposed to the real virus or disease. This is what they want you to believe. This is what they want you to believe. But adjuvants put in the body cause a hyperimmune response. The reaction can continue for years. Your white blood cells and your immune system can be stimulated for years. And it actually confuses the immune system and is well documented but not publicized. If anybody wants to know about this, go research Dr. Russell Blaylock.
To further your comment about this effect can last for years, I still do vaccination scars for adults in body talk.
Absolutely. Because your sight can still be active even. Okay? This results in autoimmune disorders and neurological disorders. We have massive amounts of autism, Parkinson's, MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, allergies, asthma. Okay, all these things have increased dramatically, and our science is getting better, our medicine is getting better. Why are we all sick? Why are we all afflicted? It does not jive. That's totally conflicting.
Except a whole lot of people don't eat properly.
We're going to get to that. Okay, so we already did this. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. This also explains the 10-time increase in Alzheimer's disease in those who receive flu vaccine 5 years in a row. This is documented statistics. No, not kidding, okay? Not kidding. Exposure to thimerosal-containing vaccines at 1 month old, so children, significantly increases with misery and unhappiness disorder. Okay? The child, the higher the exposure, the more instances that, you know how they tell you your baby has colic? I'm not entirely buying that. If you vaccinated your kid and your kid's like screaming all the time, I don't think it was colic. But again, my opinion. Also a significant risk of ADD. Now, please note that this is 12.5 units of mercury preservative, okay? This is ethyl mercury. This was the control for this study in children, young children. The regular dose that your child gets in a vaccination is 35. Now, the doctor who did this study, I can't pronounce his name, honestly, it's V, it begins with V, and it's weird, I can't even say it. He wanted to do a study that compared non-vaccinated children to vaccinated children. He was not allowed. He was only allowed to have a control group that had less of the poison than the full. And he said those exposed at 3 months found the increasing risk of neurological development disorders, including speech disorders. And he said when they say statistically significant, it means that it was 30% or higher. Is that correct? 30% or higher increase. And this was using the control group. So imagine your child with 35 units of mercury at every vaccination. Also, the amount of vaccinations that your children are getting have quadrupled since you were a kid.
The first time I ever heard of somebody not wanting to vaccinate their children, it was a girlfriend of mine and she just got pregnant. I just thought she was like the craziest person ever. It was like, how dare she? She's putting her child at risk.
And that's what we're taught.
All that kind of stuff. And then so I became, and I thought that for the longest time. I thought that she was insane, like she was one of these crazy healers, you know? Like before I even really knew what it was that she did for a living. And then I got pregnant about a year later, and I went to vaccinate my daughter. And I went in there and I was kind of chit-chatting with the girl at the front desk, and she freaked out. Like I said, like my friend's not vaccinating the children. You see right here, I'm just going to go grab the doctor or the nurse or whoever it was. And it was such a big deal that I even said, and I was just making conversation, you know? It was like the first grown-up I've seen it, like, So, and then that's actually when I was like, there's obviously something more to this. Like, why make such a big deal of it? You know, like if it's not a big deal, if vaccines aren't a big deal, why are you making it that? Right. Like, why are you freaking out over these things that I'm concerned about this, or I know something?
How many of you had measles? How many of you got vaccinated for it?
I don't remember. Oh yeah, I got vaccinated.
How many of you got mumps? How many got vaccinated for it? Measles, mumps, rubella, you were vaccinated for when you were born. Well, you're lucky.
Actually, I've never had any of them, and I never.
They actually said the incidence of contracting measles, mumps, and rubella went up after you were vaccinated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay? Protection my ass.
That's one of the grade 9 shots, and it's funny because I didn't allow.
That's a booster shot.
Okay, I didn't allow my daughter to get them.
Yeah.
And it's funny that I've said no numerous times, and yet they continually call
And say
over and over. And
Yeah,
I get
I know.
the notes, I get messages from the school,
Yeah. But
and
how-
it's been going on for 2 months.
Excellent. Yeah, and how many of you vaccinated your kids out of fear that they were going to get sick and they were going to catch a
Years
disease
ago.
and die? I vaccinated my kids. I didn't know any better. I did it out of fear. Did you know that they were told to phase it out? They were told to phase it out of vaccines. There was the big study, again, by that Dr. freaking V, if you remember his name. We're going to call him V. Anyhow, his whole report basically said that there is absolutely no benefit to vaccinating the human being, that it fucks with your immune system. It screws you right over. And his whole report was totally shut down. His report doesn't even exist anymore, by the way, but Dr. Russell Blaylock found records and documents from someone else who was at that meeting, who recorded down information about what was said and stuff like that. And they basically, at the conclusion of the meeting, decided that mercury should be phased out of all of all vaccines. And Dr. V said, well, if it's so bad, why don't you just take it out now? Take it out now. Remove all the vaccines that have mercury in them now. And they're like, no, that's way too, that's way too much money. That's too expensive. And he's like, a couple bucks, or create individual vials for vaccination. An individual vial, instead, you know how they always take it out of the same bottle? That's because it's more cost effective, and that's why there has to be that kind of preservative in there, because they're taking multiple shots out of the same bottle. So anyhow, his recommendations were totally squashed, totally poo-pooed on, and they said, oh, we'll replace it with aluminum. He's like, that's not much better. Yeah. Like, seriously, what are you thinking? In the United States, it took them until 2010 to phase out ethyl mercury. Any one of you who got H1N1, you got a shot of ethyl mercury. Thimerosal was in H1N1, and so was squalene. Squalene is a toxic substance. It occurs naturally in your body, but your body produces it when it's in combination with certain omega oils. It's natural that way. When you inject squalene through the body here, it creates a blood reaction, and it totally messes up your immune system. The American Medical Library states that squalene is too dangerous to have in vaccines. So the vaccine that was synthesized for H1N1 in the US did not have squalene in it. The one in Canada did. The one made by GlaxoSmithKline did. And also they decided that, well, squalene is too dangerous for pregnant women, so they gave pregnant women the option of having one without squalene.
The option?
The option, yes. And back to Gardasil. When I learned about Gardasil when I was doing my research project, so before I was diagnosed in 2008, 11 girls had died. And 3 months later, it was up to 16. And it, like you were saying, it only protects against 2 of the most common high-risk ones and 2 that cause warts. And when you consider that there's 35, that's just not good enough. And like, who cares? Like, warts, seriously, you're not gonna die. What about these ones?
But the commercials, I mean, everyone's.
Oh my gosh.
Healthy.
Yes.
My girls came to me and asked me about Gardasil. I said, stay away.
And they're getting them younger and younger. Whose idea was it to inject a 9-year-old? And now they're saying they're even recommending it for boys. Do boys have a vagina?
No. And they're not even, they can't, yeah.
Like, seriously. They won't get warts. That doesn't kill you anyway.
Is that the commercial where they have like
Look, there's his name.
Sorry.
So this is the committee that you talked to, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. So yeah, I should really look through my stuff here. Oh, no, right. So the Center for Disease Control claims that all these records are lost. I even went to their site and tried to look it up, and they're lost. I think that's hilarious.
They're lost.
They're just in a file somewhere under above top secret. Yes.
They're burned.
Yeah, or exactly. So again, there is no study, none. There is not a single study that exists that compares non-immunized children to immunized children. Nowhere. There is no proof that vaccines work. Okay? None.
Christine,
Yes.
there's proof that they work the opposite way. We were slowed in North America, but a lot of the countries overseas made vaccines illegal when they first came in. World Health Organization, when it went into a lot of places overseas, a lot of small countries made them illegal because they found within the first 3 years their cases of child onset diabetes with children that were under like 5 years old went up 1,600%. Their autism went up 27,000% or something. It was unheard of before they made them illegal. Funny enough, those are the same countries that we apparently war against because but they won't even allow the World Health Organization in.
And we think that these countries are uncivilized.
They're the barbaric,
backwards. Yeah, they're fighting for their rights, and we're taking it up the ass like a bunch of sheep.
We have better commercials.
Yeah. So if knowledge can create problems, it is not through ignorance that we can solve them. And that is exactly what's happening in our leadership and everything else. It's all the same. It's the same thing. It's the same system. It's the same people. It's the same motivation. The motivation is power and money. And It drives me crazy because people are like, well, why don't you go and like get a job? Why don't you work for a health food store, whatever. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that because that's not where my heart is. That's not where my heart is. I can't go against that. I can't. And
Bad things happen when you do.
yeah, bad things happen when you do. Yes, I've had several major injuries because of that, so don't do that. And what else? I think I might be almost done.
I find that even people older than me, and I'm pretty old, are very, very ignorant.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Because
Very,
they've been brought up in a
not just
system
everyone,
that had molded them to a T. Like, you have to remember that older people went through the trauma of World War I. They went through the trauma of World War II. They look at their government as the hero, the rescuer. All this medical advancement was so fabulous and wonderful. It was a savior, it was security, and it was false security.
and not only that, a lot of them got their own pieces of land and they grew everything, they done this and they done that. And then all of a sudden that land, I mean, their government can't be anything but good because they have gotten money out of all this stuff. They have done too. Like, they don't see that there is a situation in the world that you just can't believe anything. You just can't.
So we touched a little bit on nutrition already, so we're going to kind of, the only thing that I really want to talk about in the nutrition thing, yeah, this is the guy, there's very little proof that nutrition has any bearing on human health.
WTF.
Oh, I didn't delete that.
Very good.
I told you to check for that. Anyhow, we're going to talk just a brief bit about GMOs, and then we're going to give you guys a break, because I'm sure you guys are like exploding mentally at the moment. Genetically modified organisms. This is the process, okay? Is a genetically engineered organism whose genetic material has been altered using genetic engineering techniques. These techniques, usually known as recombinant DNA technology, uses DNA molecules from different sources, which are combined into one molecule to create a new set of genes. This DNA is then transferred into an organism, giving it modified or novel genes. Everybody see the fish that glow, or what's the pets that glow? What's
Yeah, it was the fish.
Okay.
Fish night lights.
Yes, fish night lights. And
I love that show.
a subset of GMOs, organisms that have been inserted with DNA that originated from different species. Now, I don't know about you guys, but the only thing that Arnold Schwarzenegger ever did really good as a senator was he said no. California wanted to remove all legal liability of labeling of GMO on any food product. Okay, so Monsanto did not want the labels on the products because they said that it creates fear and people make choices that aren't educated.
Oh, Lord. Oh, my
They're
God.
being educated. So therefore,
Yeah.
they won't buy it.
So GMO, how it works in your body, and if I screw up any of this, you may correct me. GMO is an altered organism. Your body's very used to processing whole, pure things. When you throw in something that has been genetically modified, there is a potential that parts of the RNA of the genetically modified organism can combine with your own. Think about that. Okay? Yes, and Monsanto is trying to sell that GMO products are so fantastic, they're so superior, they're so everything, they're the bomb, they're all that we need, and they are causing the suicide of one Indian farmer every 20 minutes because of the cottonseed market. They swindled India into buying GMO cotton seeds, and that's what the farmers there live on. And the GMO cotton was supposed to have 30% more yield, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It had 30% yield, period. The farmers are committing suicide to this day, one every 20 minutes.
Wow.
Okay? And if you think that it's scary, they own 97% of the world's corn market. They right now are also trying to push for GMO corn being allowed in the States everywhere. They also just finally succeeded in having GMO alfalfa accepted in the United States. Does anybody know how big a seed of alfalfa is? Pretty freaking small. What happens when GMO seeds blow into another farmer's crop? Monsanto can sue that farmer for growing his crop without permission because they own a patent on the seed. This farmer then concedes and decides I better as well just grow GMO seeds because I can't keep my crop pure.
The other thing too, when I was at the beginning of the hockey season, they had these really cool commercials about, of course, genetically modified, blah, blah, blah. But it was a different company, it was really cool, and it was by Bear, and I'm like, you son of a bitch, not only are you taking over, but you got good freaking videos. I went to the computer of Bear, Monsanto.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, but it helped get those trucks out of
DuPont, Dow Chemical, Monsanto, and there's one more. They're the four big chemical players. And also, the use of all this GMO seed is creating super weeds. It's creating super bugs. It is killing our bees.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody's watched The Happening, but if there are no bees in the world for 4 years, everything dies.
Yep.
And they are losing just massive, massive amounts of species of bees every year. Like, there are so many gone and they can't explain it. There's no bodies, there's no hives, they're just all gone. Okay? Now, if it pissed you off about that, it should piss you off about Svalbard. Everybody thinks Svalbard is from like the Golden Compass. Svalbard and the ice bears! Okay, no, in Svalbard, Norway, Monsanto has built this really big seed vault. They are stockpiling over 4.5 million pure seeds in this vault. This was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Monsanto Corporation, Syngenta Foundation, and the government of Norway, and the CGIR, which is another subdivision of the Rockefeller dynasty. Okay, they will be, if Monsanto plays their cards right, the only one who has access to pure seed by 2050. That means every farmer will have to buy every seed they grow. That means that Monsanto will own the food chain. And can you put that down a bit so people can read the quote? He says, if you control the oil, you control the country. If you control the food, you control the population. And this is from the President of the United States. Everybody working with this here?
Chris?
Yes.
Mind if I say something?
Absolutely.
Time Magazine, well, we did a report and a piece on Monsanto and how great they were and what they were doing for farming and production. And never in their history, in the history of Time Magazine, have they ever retracted a story. They have retracted the story saying that we were wrong about Monsanto and Monsanto was bad, everything else, and that's the only time in the history of Time Magazine they've ever retracted the story, so you know it's got to be some serious.
So if this doesn't freak you out, I don't know what will. And I'm going to just give you a couple other statistics here. Conspiracy theory. When I get on, going off about this, it really pisses some people off. A lot of people get very angry, very defensive. And this is my definition of conspiracy theory. This is my thing. If you haven't done your own research on a subject, you have no standing to call it a theory because you are the uninformed one and are reacting based on predetermined, pre-filtered reactions taught to you through societal conditioning. So, the first step in wisdom is to question everything, and one's last step is to come to terms with everything. So now that you see that our world is pretty fucked up, it's totally unbalanced. The male domination of our world's precious natural resources has gotten to the point that it's absolutely stupid. Women need to stand up. We need to fix the balance. There has to be an amalgamation, and there has to be women involved in this kind of decision making. Because our world, at the rate we're going and at the rate we're using things, our extinction is a very real possibility. And people don't get that. Did you know that we deforest, 5 million acres every 3 minutes? Every 3 minutes. We plant 1 million acres every 3 minutes. How long does it take a tree to grow before it's useful, like for houses and building materials? Seriously, how long? At least 20 years. Wow, planting 1 million trees. You're doing your work for the environment. Good for you. Seriously? There's not going to be enough. There will not be enough. And the thing is, there are so many other things that exist in our world right now that we could be using for an energy source that would totally remove all of our dependence on fossil fuels. You would never have to use fossil fuels again in your life. And these technologies and these scientists have been killed, suppressed, you name it, threatened, disappeared. Yes?
You see our dumps full of everybody's renovations and all the houses that are redone and all this sort of stuff, and all that goes directly to the dump. Nothing gets recycled.
That's right. And it's tragic because did you know that if people would actually tap geothermal energy, the earth produces enough geothermal energy in 1 year to power all the electricity needs of our entire population as it is right now, which is what, 9 billion? No, 7 billion. 7 billion people, approximately? Sorry, for 4,000 years. And the earth is renewing itself, so, you know, geothermal is pretty efficient. Okay? Solar energy. Solar energy is huge. If we use solar energy, we wouldn't have to use any electricity. Tidal energy, wave energy, wind energy. Despite them saying that it's too costly to use wind energy, that's a lie. It's a lie. The investment is that there is no other further gain or need to consume something after it's in place. Our system is built on being a consumer. Your job is to consume as much crap before you die. And it's not even for you, it's to make other people rich. Our whole system the way it's designed right now is a slow transfer of wealth from the blue collar to the elite who are running our world. Okay? This 5% of the population that is controlling all this shit own over 45% of our world's resources. And they don't give a rat's ass about you. So if they say that, oh, it's for the, you know, in your best interest, we're conserving, no, they're not. They're not. They're lying.
Okay, let's have about a 15-20 minute coffee break and come back and have a question and answer period.